Hello and welcome to my tiny tarot practice. I'm Amelia Ruby, and on this show, I share my journey through the tarot with episodes reflecting on each card. We're currently in the 5th and final season of the show, which is sponsored by Tarot for Creative Spirits by Cecily Saylor. You can head to the show notes to learn more about this amazing book and to get your own copy. Today's card is Judgment. In the Rider-Waite-Smith version of the tarot, the Judgment card features an angel. This angel has flaming red hair and brilliant red wings. They are cloaked in blue and gray clouds, and they have a red cross on a white banner attached to their trumpet. They are trumpeting toward these figures on the ground that seem to be raised from the dead. We can see these coffins and the gray pallor of their skin as they look upward at this angel. This image of justice is, I think, one of the more evocative depictions in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And I think that it certainly has Christian overtones in this sense of a Christian idea of a second coming, but that's not my preferred way to interpret it. With this card coming as the penultimate card of the major arcana, I like to think of Judgment as a reckoning. Not necessarily a judgmental reckoning, not this sense of a authoritarian God who decides who is good and bad or who's going to heaven or hell, but the type of reckoning that we do with our own experiences, where we feel pride and joy or grief and regret in remembering the things that we've undergone throughout our life. And again, with this card coming so close to the end of the major arcana, I think it can represent that moment for us before death, where we do look back and we do remember and we do make sense of our own experiences and feel many different feelings about them. I love how Rachel Pollack describes this card in 78 Degrees of Wisdom, where she talks about judgment as a call to rise to a more meaningful existence. And she says, we call the card Judgment because, like justice, it involves coming to terms with past experience as a part of going beyond it. With justice, the experience and the response were personal, based on your actions in the past. Here, a force greater than yourself is leading and calling you, and the judgment is not simply on the meaning of your own life, but on the true nature of existence, and the way in which you and all beings are a part of it. So where I talked about justice as a card about integrity, about aligning our actions with our values, following Rachel Pollack, I think that Judgment is a card about aligning our individual lives with the greater work of humanity, the greater being of humanity. To remember, it's about connecting that sense of being a human being. Justice attends to our humanness, but judgment attends to our beingness. And so while I think that justice can be perhaps a moral experience, judgment is a spiritual experience. Like many of the cards that we've talked about in this third line of the major arcana, it's bringing our conscious and subconscious to the collective conscious. And as we see in this card, I think it's offering all of our experiences up to what we might think of as the greater good. Not in a moralizing sense of good, but just in what I believe to be the goodness of life itself. And in showing so many different figures in this card, we're reminded that this experience, this reckoning we may undergo, is never singular, it's never individual, but always communal. And so even though we've seen this sort of illustration before, where we have, people in the foreground looking up at a figure in the sky, we saw this in the Lovers, we saw it a bit in the Hierophant, we certainly saw it in the Devil, we see it again here in Judgment, but there are so many more people in this card. Again, pointing us to our shared humanity and our shared being. And so if you pull a card in this reading, I invite you to release any sense of dread or panic that might arise with the idea of being judged, and instead to remember how you might offer yourself up to be judged by being itself. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of my Tiny Tarot practice. This fifth and final season of the show is sponsored by Tarot for Creative Spirits by Cecily Saylor. And if you'd like to get a copy of this amazing creative workbook, you could head to the show notes where you'll find an exclusive discount code for my Tiny Tarot practice listeners. Judgment is the penultimate card in the major arcana, which means there is just one more episode of this show to come. I look forward to embracing our shared reckoning as we move toward the world.